It was in 2005 when Amir Abbas Fakhravar began to think about Iran oil sanctions, when he was imprisoned in one of the most horrifying prison cells in Iran. Even then, he was passionately thinking about setting Iran free from the criminal Mullah's regime. Back then, Fakhravar was in contact with Eli Lake, a reporter at the New York Sun. Fakhravar told him about the idea of Iran oil sanctions. Based on Eli Lake's report of his interview with Fakhravar, he wrote, "That's not how this dissident sees it from the inside. Everyone I talk to, everyone is saying they know how the oil revenue goes up and up as they get poorer and goods get more expensive. We might as well have sanctions," Mr. Fakhravar said. "It's like we are living under them already. If it leads to the regime being overthrown, then so be it." Fakhravar escaped from prison in 2006 and was ready to leave the country. When Fakhravar escaped from Iran and arrived at Dubai, he spoke with the American diplomats at the US Embassy about the Iran oil sanctions. The topic of Iran oil sanctions was supposed to stay confidential until 2026, but it was eventually revealed through WikiLeaks' anonymous submission of documents. This document explains Fakhravar's idea of Iran oil sanctions like this. Fakhravar's recommendation for US policy towards Iran was complete sanctions, followed by a publicized plan by Iranian activists and opposition from outside Iran for a new alternative form of government. He said what is key is promotion of this new concept, so that when the uprising comes, the Iranian people know what they are fighting for. In July the 20th, 2006, for the first time Fakhravar testified to the Iran oil sanctions at the US Senate Committee. In 2008, Fakhravar presented the Iran oil sanction plan to the Congressman Mark Kirk. In 2010, when Mark Kirk became a US Senator, he presented the idea of Iran oil sanction, which was welcomed by his fellow Democrat and Republican co-workers. Soon after, Fakhravar and his team set up a huge campaign in Washington to promote Iran oil sanctions. This campaign was set up by the Iranian Freedom Institute, where a lot of research was done about sanctions against Iran's regime. As a result of this research, they realized that oil was the most important source of income for the regime. They also found out that Iran's oil was occupying as far as only 2% of the world oil market, although 85 to 90% of Iran's regime income is coming from the oil market. This means that the removal of Iran's oil from the world market doesn't affect her much, but the Islamic regime's economy is collapsing almost completely. This is something that all of the regime's lobbies, who are in fact Obama holdovers, lie about to the foreign authorities and politicians such as John Kerry. They say that only 40% of Iran's regime income is dependent on the oil market. Fakhravar and his team were the only opposition amongst all which was focusing on Iran oil sanctions. Unfortunately, for a long time the idea of Iran oil sanction wasn't taken seriously by foreign authorities and politicians. It was during that time when Fakhravar was invited to the Parasite show at VOA Persian in 2010.
میدونم که تحریم نفت ایران، من درباره هیچ تحریم دیگه حرف نمیزنم چون همش احمقانه میدونم.
اون که میدونی کار خب حالت نشدنی داره.
اتفاقا ما با یک تحقیق گسترده‌ای که تو مؤسسمون کردیم نشون دادیم که این کار شدنیه و لابی که الان اینجا داریم میکنیم، داریم پالیسی میکرها رو اینجا بریف میکنیم که این کار شدنیه، لطفاً به تحریم نفت ایران که شاهرگ حیاتی جمهوری اسلامی رو قطع میکنه فکر کنید.
Fakhravar and his team continued to travel to different parliaments all around the world in order to promote the concept of comprehensive and oil sanctions against Iran's regime. Interestingly enough, on the day after the announcement of Iran oil sanctions, the global stock markets reached their peak. The Islamic regime in Iran has no industry or technology to export goods overseas and eventually import currency into the country. In the past, when the regime could export Kia-Pride vehicles, the regime's income from the oil market was up to 90%. But now this has exceeded up to 99%. The oil market is the only source of income that the regime has. In Iran, we have two types of human species. First are normal Iranians, and the other are mullahs. After 40 years of Mullah's stupid behaviors, the entire world had no choice but threatening this country, and this has resulted in a horrible degradation of Iran's position on the entire planet. This situation has become like 1,000 kilograms of economical weight on top of people's heads. But on top of Mullah's heads, only 10 grams of weight was put on that they were having a lot of fun with. Since mullahs have control and power over the government, they could easily travel around the world diplomatically with their entire family and other criminal retainers. Mullahs have invested in so many countries around the world, and they have been welcomed with open arms. Mullah's species consists of only a couple of thousands of the entire population, that by stealing money from 80 million Iranians, they live the most luxurious lives you can imagine. Mullahs never understood the meaning of economic pressure. Now, oil sanction has put 1,000 kilograms of economical weight on top of mullahs' heads. But on the other hand, only 10 grams of weight is added to the other 1,000 kilograms on top of Iranians' heads. The most important thing is that mullahs have been crushing under that much pressure and understanding what people have been through for over 40 years. The regime's treasury is completely out of money. In fact, the NIC's main goal is to prevent mullahs from having access to petrodollars. But what have the petrodollars been spent on? 1. Suppression of protesters. The Islamic regime in Iran spends a lot of money on repressive forces in order to suppress people. They also buy multiple suppression devices such as Chinese water cannons. 2. Embezzlement. A huge amount of petrodollars is embezzled via people like Marjan Sheikh al-Islam Ali Agha and her husband Mehdi Khalaji. They are assisted by Mujtaba Khamenei as the head of IRGC and Alam al-Huda's son, the governor of Khorasan. They are directly connected to General Bagher-Nejad. It's interesting to know that Bagher-Nejad is Marjan's ex-husband. A great part of petrodollars is stolen by this network of money laundering and saved in their bank accounts overseas. 3. Terrorism financing. A majority of petrodollars are spent on financing more than 150 terrorist groups in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and South America, such as Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq, Fatemiyun in Afghanistan, Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and its new version in Venezuela, Hamas in Palestine, and so on. Iranian people's petrodollars go straight into their pockets. 4. Uranium enrichment. During a negotiation, Russians made a promise to support mullahs. In return, Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, asked Zarif to give Russia $70 to $80 billion out of $150 billion the Islamic regime was supposed to earn from the enrichment, plus the enriched uranium. 5. Society of Seminary or brainwashing machine. Mullahs never decrease the budget invested on the Islamic seminaries. They in fact tend to increase it every year. Besides petrodollars, drug dealing is also another source of income for Khamenei and his family, with billions of dollars every year. On behalf of the NIC team, we promise you that after the fall of the criminal and unworthy Islamic regime in Iran, under a stable and modern constitutional law, this country will immediately grow globally. There are many successful and passionate Iranians who start from a 0 point and eventually get to the top global positions. One day, Iran will be a great country again, with the help of those intelligent and freedom-loving Iranians. This country will regain its pride, and the Iranian passport will become valuable again.